Morning. It's another day that we can begin with Jesus. And I hope that this past weekend you were able to kind of take a break and rest from kind of the craziness of our lives. And I hope you're ready as we start another week to go forward with Him. With that, let's begin. I think one of the subjects that I really did not have a fun time doing or good time doing, and I always struggled with, was math. One of the big reasons why I ended up struggling so much was because the most important parts of doing homework and in tests is the ability to show your work. Now, I remember when I was growing up, during the summers, I would usually get this wonderful gift from my parents as a reward for finishing another school year. And basically, it was just like math workbooks and other workbooks and whatnot. But like if you look at the back of those books, you can have all the answers, right? The answer keys are usually there. And I remember I wasn't the most honest kid growing up, and I would always remember taking a look and peeking and writing down all the answers as a quick way to finish these math books that were supposed to be used throughout the summer. Now, as you know, writing the answers is simply not enough, especially when you get to more complicated math problems and you have to show work because it's necessary to see how you got to that point. Now, my math teacher in high school for like Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 was relentless when it came to showing work. For him, I could give all the wrong answers, but as long as I showed work, he gave us some credit. Of course, having the right answer is ideal, but by us showing the work, he was able to see where we went wrong, and he could help us and correct us and make it so that we could figure out how to get the correct answer. Now, when I think about the spiritual walk, and mine in particular, I think of it very similarly to this idea of showing the work. A lot of us, I think, growing up in the church know that Jesus is the answer, right? Jesus loves me, like Jesus is everything. We know this, but some of us have simply that, just the answer. And like in math, we have answers, but no work, no proof, and there's no way of knowing how we get to this answer. So today, when we look back at Hebrews, hopefully you can see what he's trying to do here. All of this back and forth is really trying to, in other words, show the work. And Hebrews chapter 7 is no exception to that. In the past two chapters, 5 and 6, you may have noticed that there was a brief mentioning of someone by the name of Melchizedek. And you're probably wondering, who is Melchizedek? And why does Hebrews talk about him so much? Chapter 7 begins with a brief history of the king and the priest by the name Melchizedek. And we don't have a lot of evidence telling of who this person was, but we originally find his story in Genesis chapter 14. And I encourage you to take a look at the story, but let me give you a summary. Abraham and his nephew Lot, they were separated, and then Lot moved to the city of Sodom. And you see, there were 5 kings that banded together, but were defeated by these 4 kings from the east in the valley of Siddim, or the Dead Sea Valley. And Abraham heard that these kings went on to seize the city, but in the process of doing so, they also seized his own nephew Lot. So Abraham, as a great uncle, called out 318 trained men and then went out to go and rescue his nephew. As Abraham returned from this rescue operation, successful operation, he's met by Melchizedek, who is the king of Salem and the priest of the God Most High. And Melchizedek brings out bread, wine, and then he blesses Abraham and he gives praise to God Most High. And then after this incident, we don't see Melchizedek whatsoever until Hebrews chapter 7. Verse 1 to 3 of this chapter reveals a very important few things about this person. We really don't know anything else about this guy. We don't know his family line. We don't know his lineage. We don't know when he died or when he was even born. And then from verse 4 to 10, Hebrews shows the work by explaining how someone of this great prestige, someone who blessed a very significant father of faith in Christian belief, and how this person responded to the king, this high priest, with a response of giving 10% of all that he owned. Imagine this. Christians are hearing this definitely struggled with trying to understand who Jesus is and why a life with him was so worth it. So Hebrews takes this important figure in history, Abraham, and looks at the interaction that Abraham has with Melchizedek, who was a king and priest of God Most High. And so they're probably thinking, oh yeah, definitely Melchizedek is an important person, because if Abraham, someone that we see as really important, looks to Melchizedek and gives him 10% of all he owes, man, that's really a significant person. And so because of that, there's this connection. We should also honor Melchizedek as well. And then Hebrew gives us this comparison between Melchizedek and Jesus, with of course Jesus being the greater. Look at Hebrews chapter 7, verse 15 and 16. It says, "This becomes even more evident when another priest arises in the likeness of Melchizedek, who has become a priest, not on the basis of a legal requirement concerning bodily descent, but on the power of an indestructible life." Hebrews makes a strong point. Jesus is also a priest who comes from a similar likeness of Melchizedek. Now, typically, in order to be considered a priest, you had to have certain qualifications, and specifically, you had to come from a certain tribe. And if you remember, priest originally came from the tribe of Levi. And as you know, Jesus did not come from the tribe of Levi. Rather, he came from the tribe of Judah. And guess what? Who else do we know that is established or is now established as a king and a priest, but we don't know his origin? Melchizedek. But the even more powerful thing that Hebrew lays out is this, is that Jesus, who is the ultimate king and priest forevermore, is because of the power of an indestructible life. What does that even mean? Well, Hebrews is clearly pointing to the death and resurrection of Jesus. And Jesus is literally the fulfillment of verse 17, which is also a reference to Psalms 110, verse 4. It says, "For it is witnessed of him, you are a priest forever, after the order of Melchizedek." And that very priest is Jesus. You see, Hebrews has laid out the work and has shown you why Jesus is truly who he is, and why the promise that Jesus gives us makes life with him so much worth it. So church, I want to leave you with a question. The evidence and the proof of who Jesus is clear. So will you accept him as your king and priest? I pray you do.